Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video you guys are going to get to meet all 26 of my leopard geckos. I wanted to film them eating instead of me just like picking them out of their enclosures and holding them so that you could watch something that's pretty fun like them eating, and then also they wouldn't have to be stressed out by being taken out in the middle of the day for me to hold and introduce. So I hope that's okay with you if I come in as a voiceover for the rest of the video once this intro is done. This intro is going to be a tad bit longer because I want to address some questions that I typically get. I promise it'll only be a minute or two, but a few questions that I typically get are about my leopard geckos because a lot of them are special needs. So like I said, I have 26 leopard geckos. One of those is Aaron's, his name is Vash, but the rest of the 25 are mine. Over half of the geckos have some sort of disorder or disability, and sometimes they have both. The rest have been adopted, rescued, or have come from situations of rehoming. A lot of the times if they are rescued, they have been like underweight or had stuck shed or something like that that required immediate assistance, but then in the long term they're completely normal, so that's why I don't classify them as special needs. My special needs geckos, on the other hand, need assistance for the rest of their lives. There's a few disorders that you're going to see that are pretty common amongst my leopard geckos, including Enigma syndrome. You'll also see things like white and yellow syndrome, stunted growth, lemon frost with a tumor. You'll also see facial deformities. So if my geckos look or act just kind of odd, it will typically be boiled down to the fact that they are not a 100% normal healthy gecko. And if I say this gecko has Enigma syndrome, it basically just means this gecko has a neurological disorder that is associated with their morph. So it is a completely avoidable disorder, and if you want to learn more about it, or white and yellow syndrome, or my lemon frost, or anything like that, I will include all of the links down below to other videos I've made on my channel about my special needs geckos. Another question that I get quite often, because I have so many leopard geckos, is are you a breeder? The answer is no. I run a sanctuary for leopard geckos that come from bad situations, or that have really bad genetic disorders, or that have birth defects like I was mentioning earlier. So no, I do not breed any of those geckos, as you should not breed geckos with disorders or with birth defects or that are rescues or have unknown genetics. Geckos like these should not and cannot be bred. Another question that I get a lot is about the enclosures that you see behind me. So these are what I call gecko bookshelves. They're basically bookshelves that have been modified to be proper homes for leopard geckos. I like them because they're front opening, they're aesthetically pleasing, and they're safe for my geckos. Yes, there's heat in them. That's a question I get most often. Yes, there's heat. There is heat tape inside of each and every shelf for all of the geckos. Please don't keep your geckos without heat. Yes, they are safe. I've used gecko bookshelves for 4 years, and these specific gecko bookshelves for over a year now. So if you have any questions about that, again, I will include a link to how I made these bookshelves in the links below. In today's video, the leopard geckos will be eating hornworms. Now, hornworms are a delicious, juicy, calcium-filled, low in fat treat or food that you can give to your leopard geckos. The reason that the hornworms are not dusted is because they are already very calcium rich. So there's no reason to add calcium on top of them because they are calcium rich. And finally, I have Raygo merch out. So a lot of you have absolutely fallen in love with Raygo, as have I, and his story. And if you haven't learned anything about Raygo, you will learn a little bit later when I show him, but I'll also include a link below to Raygo's story. That way you can learn about him and like how incredible it is that he's come so far. Raygo merch is out. I'll include some pictures up here on the screen. The design was made by the incredible Starry Page Art, also known as Scaly Gems on Instagram. I will include links to her art Instagram and her gecko Instagram down below. Now, with all of that said, again, I'm sorry for the long intro, but everybody asks the same questions over and over and it drives me nuts, so I just wanted to address all of it before the video even started. Now let's go ahead and get started. If you have any additional questions, please leave them down below. So we're going to start off with my gecko Sam, who is one half of the Sam and Gilly duo that you guys might be familiar with. They are no longer housed together. I will make a video all about that, but just know that no one got hurt. This was just like a preemptive decision on my part. But anyways, Sam and Gilly both have severe Enigma syndrome. They were housed together ever since birth. They've had their syndrome for as long as I've had them, which is since
2016.
And they're just really great geckos, but it's taken a long time for them to get to a place where they are healthy and stable, even with their syndrome. They both still need assisted shed now and again, but they've come a long way since when I first met them. When I first met them, Gilly was the worst off of the two, so this is Sam, and she was pretty okay. She was a little underweight, and she had stuck shed, which ended up making her lose a couple of toes, but other than that, she was okay. Gilly was the one who was in really dire situations, and you'll see her next. And this is her sister Gilly. Now, if you'll notice, Gilly's movements are naturally more sporadic. I would say that Gilly, her symptoms are less stress-induced, whereas Sam's are more stress-induced. So Sam can be pretty calm and still until you handle her, or if she's like in shed or something. Then if she gets like stressed or spooked, then she will have more symptoms. With Gilly, it's a little bit different. She's pretty good when it comes to handling and like having assisted shed and whatnot, but she's naturally going to have more symptoms. And I think that's because when she was rehomed to me, she was literally nothing but skin and bone, and she was so pale she was like basically white in color, which as you can see she's yellow naturally. But anyway, Sam and Gilly are doing phenomenally separated, and I'm gonna film a video all about that, so don't ask any questions because I promise I'll explain when the time comes. This is Eddard. He is actually my only male Enigma, so he's the only male I have that has Enigma syndrome. All the rest are girls, which it actually can be explained away by the fact that girls ovulate, and so that stresses them out and makes their Enigma syndrome worse, or they were bred, which makes it even worse. But Eddard is my only boy with Enigma syndrome. He's a gorgeous little man. I've had him since 2016, and he's just an absolute joy. I recently tried to put Eddard in a larger enclosure, and I gave him, I think, a week and a half to try and get acclimated, and he did nothing but freak out and death roll and try to escape the enclosure, so he had to go back to a smaller one. That's just part of his Enigma syndrome. This is Mira, and Mira is a gecko that has stunted growth, and she also has deformed eyelids. This is from an incubation fluctuation issue, and it's not genetic as far as I'm aware. But basically when she was a baby, her eyelids didn't properly form, so the skin grew over her eye on one side to compensate, and then a little bit on this side. So the eye on the side that you can't see is the one that's worse off, but it's also her bigger eye. Mira should be a normal sized gecko, but the person who had her as a baby was not tongue feeding her or like properly helping her eat, which is what she needed. I think she was just dropping insects in the enclosure and just letting her find them, or maybe she just wasn't feeding her as normally as you're supposed to feed baby geckos, but regardless, she has stunted growth, and so she is a small, full-grown leopard gecko. This is my gecko Marjorie, who also has stunted growth. As you can see, she's pretty small for a full-grown leopard gecko. She simply wasn't fed enough in the first year of her life. In fact, she was almost a year old when I got her, and she was only, I think, 19 grams, which is tiny. That's so small. So the person who had her, who like bred her parents and she was born there, they just didn't feed her enough because she needed some assisted feedings because she has a neurological disorder that is not genetic. It's simply something that happened while she was incubating. While she was incubating, she also had some underdeveloped eyelids. Her eyelids don't meet in the corners. It's not something really severe, but from time to time she does get like a weird skin growth there that has to be removed. It's been happening ever since she was a baby, and the person who rehomed her to me thought she was having like eye infection after eye infection, and when I took a look at her I was like, no, that's just skin. And I recognized that because a lot of my geckos who have underdeveloped eyelids also have skin issues. So she's pretty normal aside from having her underdeveloped eyelids and her neurological issues. Now this is my gecko Melisandre, and there's a lot to say about her. This year, Melisandre decided to lay eggs, and instead of just laying eggs normally, her body decided to hold on to them, and they overcalcified. She became egg-bound. Fortunately, she did pass them on her own after my vet was like, she saw her and then said come back in 2 weeks, and if she hasn't passed them, then we'll take measures. But she passed them both. She passed one 1 week ahead of the other, which was super weird, but ever since laying, her syndrome has become dramatically worse, and that's just something that happens a lot of the time with female Enigmas. Also, please note, I fed her a bigger worm off camera by accident. This is Raygo. Raygo is a very special gecko. I'm sure a lot of you recognize him. He's just absolutely wonderful. Raygo is going to do something here. Yeah, he's never ever done that before. He literally leapt for the worm, caught onto it, and I was like, okay, let's put you back in your house. He's never done that before. Usually he's patient and he just waits for me to feed him, but hornworms are another game, y'all. Everybody loves hornworms in this house. So Raygo is a gecko that was born with eye defects and other facial deformities. So Raygo has double cleft nostrils, which basically means his nostrils open up into his mouth, so like there's no skin or bone that blocks it. And then he also has 2 underdeveloped eyes and eyelids, which leaves him quite visually impaired. So he's a very skittish gecko. He's doing really great with handling, but you know, he's always going to be a gecko that is going to startle easily, especially from touch or sound, because he can't see. So those things are going to extra alert him. He's doing really, really great though. He's grown so much and he's super cute. I don't know his morph. I don't know how old he is. All I can do is guess. I think that he is probably some sort of max snow, and I also think that he has stunted growth, and therefore he will not ever be the size of a full-grown gecko. Up next, we have Miss Roz, who is another gecko that has Enigma syndrome. She's also a white and yellow, and I don't know why people cross white and yellow with Enigma when they produce pretty similar aesthetics. You're only really making a problem by crossing the both of them, because they both can have neurological disorders, but whatever. So she has Enigma syndrome. I'm cleaning up her poop in the clip. And also, if she looks very skinny to you, it's because she decided to lay eggs this year. In fact, she laid a total of 10 eggs this year, which is just like, girl, why? Why'd you gotta do that to yourself? Her syndrome didn't worsen, however, she did lose quite a bit of weight, and she also lost all of her color. So if you see very pale orange on her, it used to be bright orange. She reminds me a lot of Shireen, and I wonder if they're related, but I don't think I'll ever really know. Roz was also not properly helped when she had stuck shed at her former home, so she is missing some toes. So she's like missing 2 toes on one foot and 1 toe on the other foot, but she gets around just fine. Up next is this goofball of a gecko, Merlin. Merlin is an Enigma, but I have not seen Enigma syndrome from him. Instead, he just is really deformed. Like, he has pointed ears, his bones all stick out on his shoulders and his spine. He's a really weird shaped gecko, and I generally think that's probably just because he has some questionable genetics. Merlin was given to me as a pet only situation because he's an Enigma and the person didn't want him to be bred. I absolutely adore Merlin. He is a personality for sure. I've had him since 2016. And just now, for the first time this year, I've gotten him to eat superworms. He was so picky for the first year he was with me. All he would eat was mealworms, and I got him to branch out some. And up next is Tormund. Tormund was born with 1 little eye and 1 big eye. So basically, on this side, she'll turn her face in a minute, but on this side is her small eye, and on the other side is her normal sized eye. And there's quite a difference you'll see when she turns her head. It even affects the shape of her head as well. And Tormund also has a very slight neurological issue. It's really only seen in moments of like stress or handling or excitement. Other than that, she's pretty normal. But she's a great, great gecko. And also her name is Tormund because I thought she was a boy, like she was rehomed to me as temperature sexed male, but she ended up being a girl, so we just kept the name Tormund, and I call her Tormy, and she's my little orange queen who has a male name. Here you can see both the small eye and the large eye at the same time. There's quite a difference, and she has vision in both of them for sure, because I can see 2 fully formed eyes. And she was at my vet's recently, and the vet said that she definitely reacts when the one eye is compromised, so she has vision in both. Granted, the little eye doesn't offer as much vision or as like proper vision as the other eye, but it still works, and that's what counts. Up next is Amy, and Amy's actually the 3rd leopard gecko that I ever got, and I've had her since 2015, so a long time we've been together now. Amy was rehomed to me when her owner had to move out of state. She has no health problems, she came to me in good health, and she's been nothing but a delight the whole time that I've had her. She's a little bit of a salty queen sometimes, so like she'll let me know when she's not in the mood to interact with me, and that's just fine. But other than that, she's never been aggressive, she's never bitten me, she's absolutely wonderful, and she's one of the only geckos whose former owners has actually asked how she's done in this home. So she's really loved before she came here, and she's really loved now. Amy is named after Aemon Targaryen, which is a male name. I was told Amy was a boy when I got her. Then I found out she was a girl after I had already named her Aemon, so that's why I call her Amy. But I'm actually at least Amy's third or fourth home because Amy was with someone else, and then they had gotten her from a situation of rehoming as well. Speaking of rehoming, this is Fritz, and Fritz also came to me from a situation of adoption. He was put up for adoption at Happy Gecko Rescue, which is no longer open. It was only open for a brief period of time. But Fritz was my first leopard gecko ever. I got him on July 1st, 2015. And he really doesn't like me or anything else except food. So that's why he just went and hid and doesn't want anything to do with me, which is just fine. He's my grumpy dinosaur, and I let him do his own thing because I respect his wishes. This is my gecko Varys, and he was rehomed to me in 2016 off of Craigslist. I also got my gecko Brienne at the same time. They weren't cohabbed, but they did come from the same person. And Varys is a really big gecko now, but at the time, he was pretty underweight. In fact, he was like 40 grams when I met him, and now he's 80, so he's a big dude. Varys is also just a really good gecko. He just is kind of like Fritz and likes being kept to himself, but also Fritz will bite me and Varys won't. Varys and Brienne were my fourth and fifth leopard geckos. This is my gecko Myrcella, and I got her in 2016, a little bit after I got Varys and Brienne actually. She's my first leopard gecko with Enigma syndrome, and that's a good thing because her Enigma syndrome is really slight compared to all of the other Enigmas that I have. But she's still an Enigma, so it could still actually get worse if she were to ever lay eggs, so fingers crossed she never does that. But Myrcella is a feisty little thing. She has tried to bite. She someday probably will, but I adore her personality. I adore everything about her. She just happens to be a little bit of a saucy lady. I like to joke that I should have named her Cersei instead of Myrcella, but Cersei is just so evil, I'll never name a gecko Cersei, ever. This is Egret, and comparatively, she's one of the newer additions to the family. She is also one of the younger geckos in the family at only a year and a few months old. Egret decided to lay eggs this year, which was just absolutely insane that two of my youngest girls, Roz and Egret, would decide to lay 10 eggs each. It was absolutely wild, but she has literally grown throughout that process because she wasn't even done growing, and she's put back on the weight and then some, so she's doing great, especially compared to Roz, who could still stand to put on some weight and some color. Egret has one small eye and one big eye. She also has a little bit of an underbite, both of which came from incubation fluctuation while she was in the egg. The reason I decided to get her is because she reminded me so much of Tormund, and Tormund was born in May, and then a year later Egret was born. They both have one big eye and one small eye on the same side, and I just thought, like, I need to have her. She's just too precious. And here she is acting super goofy because she got a little bit of water on her feet. Up next is the absolute weirdo Benjen. So if you thought Merlin was weird, get ready for Benjen, who is just as weird, if not more. So Benjen and Merlin actually came from the same place, and Benjen has an underbite as well as a really flattened, deformed skull. Benjen's issues are genetic. They are not from an incubation fluctuation. I've seen other geckos with his morph that have these weird flattened skulls or underbites. His underbite is pretty prominent, especially if you look at it from the side. Oh, even if you look at it from the front, it's still pretty prominent. But everybody absolutely adores him on the channel, and so do I. He is full of personality, and he's a great gecko. Like Merlin, it took him some time to accept food. Like, I think the first 2 months he was here, he didn't eat a single thing. But ever since then, he's been really good about eating all kinds of foods, and if it moves, he will try to eat it. In this clip here, especially as he turns his head, you can see how far out his lower jaw sticks from his upper jaw. You can also see how indented and flattened his skull is, especially behind his eyes, in between his ears and his eyes. Up next is Jojen, and I was told Jojen has white and yellow syndrome, though aesthetically he doesn't remind me much of a white and yellow, but he did come from a big name breeder who said outright he had white and yellow syndrome, so that's just what I can go with. He definitely doesn't have Enigma syndrome. Like, whatever neurological issue he has is very different from Enigma syndrome, and it fits the bill for white and yellow, so that's why I say it's white and yellow syndrome. Jojen is a big leopard gecko, and he's still growing, and his white and yellow syndrome doesn't hold him back at all. As you just saw, he definitely gets the food, especially like considering when he was a baby he ate out of a bowl, which is just crazy for neurological syndrome geckos. I've always had to hand feed, but with him he hasn't really needed coddling. He's been able to do a lot on his own. That said, he also does startle very easily, and it can send him into like a spasm, or also he can bite me. If he gets too startled, he will bite me, which has just not been pleasant. So typically when an Enigma is stressed, they will death roll, but for Jojen, it ends up making him flail. So he has like a spasm, and he just kind of like shoots away. Like, he tries to run as fast as he can, and sometimes he'll like run into stuff. He also, like I said, flails his body, so it's a really unnatural fast movement. This is Viserion. He is my lemon frost. Now, lemon frosts are leopard geckos that are relatively new to the trade. I think 2016, 2017 is when they were first discovered, and I put air quotes around discovered because it's not really a discovery. It just so happened that two normals bred together and a mutation was created. Lemon frosts have the issue of cancerous tumors. So instead of having a neurological disorder, they're just blessed with these horrible tumors that grow on their face and body. These tumors are not preventable because they are linked to the iridophore pigments, which are what make lemon frost that cool, bright pastel yellow color and give them that really cool eye trait. So you can't have a lemon frost without also having these cancerous tumors. And the tumors aren't just on the outside, they're also on the inside. Now, Viserion has a tumor, but you can't see it right now because his head is turned, but in a second, I'll make sure his head's turned so you can see it, but it's a rather big white mass on the underside of his jaw, and he's had it since April of last year, and there's really no prognosis because they're so new. We don't know how long they can live with tumors. We don't know how bad the tumors can get. All we know is that they're cancerous, and so Viserion's kind of like a test, really. I'll just be able to give him a comfortable place for as long as I have with him. I've already had longer than I expected to. I've been told by some people that their geckos with tumors typically died 9 months after the tumors appeared, but Viserion has well passed that, so who knows. And in case you were wondering, yes, people still breed lemon frosts, and they still sell them for as much as they can get them for, and they still end up having cancerous tumors. It's super inhumane. This is my gecko, Liana, and fortunately she has zero problems aside from a really bad attitude. She's never bitten me, but she has definitely wanted to. So she's very fast, she's very food motivated, she doesn't want to be held, she doesn't want to be bothered. That's pretty typical for max snow blizzards in general. So I just let her do her own thing, just like I do with Fritz. If she doesn't want to be handled, except for like, health checks here and there, then I'm not going to bother her. This is my fiance Aaron's gecko Vash, who I care for. And ever since Aaron got him, he's kind of just become my leopard gecko, but again, he is Aaron's. That's why he doesn't have a Game of Thrones name, although I did give him one. I like to call him Jorah. Vash has absolutely zero health problems, zero behavior problems. He's the easiest gecko. He is like the most chill gecko. Yeah, he's honestly great. Aaron named him after Vash the Stampede, but I don't know what that's from. I can't remember off the top of my head, so if you know, I'm sure you'll let me know down in the comments down below. Earlier when I was feeding Varys, I mentioned a gecko named Brienne, and this is her. Brienne is a big queen, and she lets you know it. She's got a lot of personality, but it's not in a negative way. She's just very energetic, and she's very willful. I absolutely adore that about her. Brienne is a healthy gecko now. When I got her, she was underweight and she had stuck shed. Her color was also really pale. Like, instead of being orange, she was yellow. But now she's orange and she's gorgeous and everything's great with her. She does have some eyes that are like really big. That's typically not a trait that breeders will breed for, and she probably ended up at a pet store, or like she was like a really cheap price at an expo because her eyes are so big. They do sometimes cause her problems. Like sometimes she will pull on the upper eyelids while she's shedding too much, and they'll kind of flip inside out a little bit, and then I have to correct them. But other than that, she does just fine. Also, in these clips, there's like a tiny piece of stuck shed on her nail. Don't worry, I got it off after she was done eating. If you guys are interested in hearing a story that happened earlier this year about how Brienne basically amputated her own toe, let me know. I've never told that story because it's just like, it's not really a big deal, but during the moment, it was absolute madness. So let me know. This is my gecko Renly, and she's the second leopard gecko that I ever had. I've had her since 2015, and I originally saw her on Craigslist. When I saw a picture of her on Craigslist, she looked healthy, like a good weight, but then when I met her in person, she was super skinny, and also she was being sold as a male, but she's in fact a lady, which is why her name is Renly, which I absolutely love for her and I would never change. Renly took a little bit of time to have, TLC, but her personality shined through the whole time. The very first night she was home, she climbed up a tree in her enclosure, and it was a 10-gallon, and she scaled the screen lid all the way across and dropped onto the floor. I was like, oh, so I have a crested gecko now. I don't have a leopard gecko, I have a crested gecko. If I am to believe what the people who rehomed her to me said about her, Renly is between 9 and 10 years old today, which is absolutely wild. Renly also has some depth perception issues due to the size of her eyes. This is my gecko Tywin, and I purchased him at an expo in 2016, which I do not recommend doing, by the way. I do not recommend buying from expos. Reason being is you could run into a lot of issues with the gecko's health. Also, there's the whole ethics that come into play with supporting mass breeders, but whatever. I saw Tywin. I knew he needed help. I saw him first on a Saturday, and then I said if he's still there on Sunday, I'll bring him home, and he was. He was crammed into this tiny cup, and in fact, when we were at Tinley, another breeder was like, here, take this bigger cup for him so he doesn't have to sit in that on the whole way home, because it was just like, literally he couldn't even turn around, and he was touching his own body, and he had been like that for days in this cup. I'm also glad I took him home because he has some health issues that I'm comfortable addressing. So he has reoccurring sperm plugs that I'm capable of removing. He also has these scars over his pores, which means they were never properly cleaned. So the ones that are not scarred over, I can clean them. This is my gecko Elia, and Elia is just an absolute delight to have. She is the most recent addition to the family. As you can tell, she looks quite different from other leopard geckos, and that is because she has metabolic bone disease. So her limbs are bent and broken in place like that, and her back is all lumpy. Basically, metabolic bone disease is the softening of a reptile's bones because there's not enough calcium. And she looked absolutely horrible. The first picture I ever saw of her when she was being rehabilitated by the spotted beta on Instagram. You can watch her full story here on YouTube. I'll include it in the links below, along with a bunch of other links that will help you understand the geckos more, especially like their conditions like Enigma syndrome and things like that. But Elia is just an absolute delight to have. I'm thrilled to have her. I fell in love with her the moment that I saw the picture of her basically on death's door back in November of last year. And she's a fighter. Like, she was not willing to give up, and the spotted beta and I were not willing to give up on her. And you can tell, like, there's so much life in her. She loves chasing down her food. She's got a big appetite, and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled she thrived. I'm thrilled that she is thriving. Her bones will always be like that. She will always have these crooked, bent legs and a little bumpy back, but that's just who she is. That's how she is. We love her all the same. This is my gecko Aria, and she may look beautiful and healthy to you, and she is now, but she's actually the gecko in my family who's been to the vet more than any other leopard gecko, which is just wild. She had a lot of health issues, both her and her cage mate did. Her cage mate unfortunately passed away from those issues. Aria was able to hang on, and now she's doing great today. To this day, Sansa is the only leopard gecko I've ever had pass away, and I don't know if I've made a full video explaining their story, but if you're interested in that, let me know down below. It would certainly be a sad one, but I think it would be good to explain the whole situation. Last but not least, we have Shireen, whose house had to be removed so she could eat. She has severe Enigma syndrome, and that is basically because she was bred for many years of her life, and it has drained all of the color out of her. She used to once be all orange, and now she is this pale gray color with some very sparse spotting. It's really sad that someone exploited her to this degree, but she's been with me now going on 2 years. Actually, probably 2 years already because it's August. Wow, that's incredible. And I'm really happy to have her, but it does just really make me sad that someone decided to worsen her condition by continuing to profit off of her. So I don't know how long I'll have her, because geckos that have Enigma syndrome and female geckos who have been bred typically have shorter lives. So I'm not sure how long I'll have her, but I'm going to enjoy every moment that I do get to have with her because she's an absolute delight. Oh, by the way, I've also seen her grandchildren and her children firsthand, and they have Enigma syndrome as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in Raygo merch, the link is down below. Like I said earlier, please do check it out. Hi, big boy. Oh, good stretch. Yes. Good stretch. Oh my goodness. Please also hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.